On March 8, 1968, a Soviet Golf II-class ballistic missile submarine designated K-129 failed to transmit its scheduled communication to Pacific Fleet headquarters in Petropavlovsk. The submarine carried 3 nuclear-tipped missiles, 98 crew members, and orders to patrol a sector of the North Pacific west of Hawaii. When the second scheduled transmission was also missed, Soviet Naval Command initiated emergency protocols. Within hours, dozens of ships and aircraft were searching a swath of ocean the size of Texas. They found nothing. The Soviet Navy searched for 2.5 months, deploying their entire Pacific Fleet in the largest submarine search operation in maritime history. They never located K-129. The submarine had vanished as completely as if it had been erased from existence. Soviet Premier Alexei Kosygin was informed that one of his ballistic missile submarines, a vessel carrying enough nuclear firepower to destroy 3 American cities, was lost somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, and no one knew where, why, or how. But someone did know. 3,000 miles away, in a windowless operations center beneath the Pentagon, U.S. naval intelligence had been tracking K-129 since the moment she departed port. When she disappeared, American hydrophones scattered across the Pacific seafloor had recorded something the Soviets never heard: the sound of her dying. This is the story of the Soviet submarine that disappeared, and America's secret plan to steal it. The year 1968 marked a dangerous inflection point in the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union had accumulated enough nuclear weapons to destroy each other dozens of times over. Both nations maintained fleets of ballistic missile submarines that could strike with almost no warning. The submarines were the ultimate deterrent, designed to survive a first strike and retaliate with extinction-level force. Their existence maintained peace through the promise of mutual annihilation. But that balance depended on predictability. Each side needed to know where the other submarines were, what they were capable of, and how they operated. The nuclear calculus required constant surveillance, intelligence collection, and technological assessment. A submarine that couldn't be tracked was a submarine that could destabilize everything. K-129 was a Gulf II-class diesel-electric submarine, commissioned in 1960 and assigned to the Soviet Pacific Fleet. At 300 feet long and displacing 2,300 tons submerged, she was smaller and older than the Soviet Union's newer nuclear-powered boats. But she carried 3 R-21 ballistic missiles in vertical launch tubes behind her conning tower, each missile tipped with a nuclear warhead in the megaton range. Her mission profile was simple: patrol the North Pacific, remain undetected, and be prepared to launch missiles on command. In the event of nuclear war, K-129 and submarines like her would constitute the Soviet Union's second strike capability, the guarantee of retaliation that prevented a first strike from being launched. The submarine's commander was Captain First Rank Vladimir Kobzar, a veteran submariner with 15 years of service. His crew of 98 men included officers, missile technicians, sonar operators, engineers, and torpedo men. Many were conscripts completing mandatory military service. Some were married with children. All understood the gravity of their mission. They were the hidden edge of Soviet nuclear deterrence, invisible and lethal. K-129 departed Rybaki Naval Base near Petropavlovsk on February 24, 1968, beginning what was designated as her 11th patrol. She carried provisions for 70 days, fuel for approximately 12,000 nautical miles, and orders to patrol a sector of the North Pacific roughly 1,600 miles northwest of Hawaii. The patrol area was chosen specifically to position K-129 within striking range of the American West Coast, while remaining outside the range of U.S. coastal defenses. The submarine would operate alone, maintaining radio silence except for scheduled communications every few days to confirm her status. What Captain Kobzar and other Soviet submariners didn't know was that the United States had spent the previous decade constructing an underwater surveillance network called the Sound Surveillance System, or SOSUS. The system consisted of arrays of hydrophones anchored to the ocean floor at strategic locations across the Atlantic and Pacific. The hydrophones detected acoustic signatures like engine noise, propeller cavitation, and hull resonance, and transmitted the data via undersea cables to shore stations where analysts identified and tracked submarines. SOSUS was so sensitive it could detect a Soviet submarine leaving port from thousands of miles away. K-129 was detected by SOSUS hydrophones the moment she entered the open ocean. U.S. Naval Intelligence designated her Contact 742 and began tracking her transit across the North Pacific. This wasn't unusual. Soviet submarines were tracked routinely, their patrol patterns cataloged and analyzed. K-129 followed a standard route, maintaining a depth of approximately 60 feet during daylight hours and surfacing at night to run her diesel engines and recharge batteries. Her course was predictable, her speed consistent. She was a known quantity, behaving exactly as expected. Then, on March 8th, she disappeared. The SOSUS station at Adak, Alaska, was the first to notice. At approximately 0340 hours Greenwich Mean Time, K-129's acoustic signature vanished from tracking displays. The analysts assumed she had gone deep and shut down her engines, a routine maneuver to avoid detection. But hours passed, and the submarine didn't resurface. By March 9th, U.S. Naval Intelligence began reviewing acoustic data from multiple SOSUS arrays, searching for any trace of the missing submarine. What they found was a recording from a hydrophone array positioned roughly 1,700 miles northwest of Hawaii. At the precise moment K-129 disappeared, the hydrophones had captured a brief, violent acoustic event. A low-frequency rumble followed by several sharper transient sounds consistent with structural collapse. The audio signature matched known recordings of submarine implosions. It was obvious. K-129 had sunk. The realization carried immediate strategic implications. A Soviet ballistic missile submarine had been lost in international waters, carrying nuclear weapons and classified Soviet naval technology. If the submarine could be located, it represented an intelligence opportunity of almost unimaginable value. Soviet missile systems, cryptographic equipment, sonar technology, torpedo designs, reactor components, all of it potentially accessible. The Central Intelligence Agency was briefed within 48 hours. The director, Richard Helms, understood immediately. This wasn't just an intelligence operation. This was a chance to penetrate the deepest secrets of Soviet naval strategy. But first, they had to find the wreckage. And the North Pacific is enormous, dark, and deep. The CIA assembled a team designated the Special Projects Office. Its mission was to locate K-129, assess the feasibility of recovery, and if possible, retrieve the submarine or critical sections of it. The operation was given a code name, Project Azorian. It would become one of the most complex, expensive, and audacious intelligence operations of the Cold War, and it would remain secret for 6 years. The search began with acoustic data. Naval intelligence analysts used the SOSUS recordings to triangulate K-129's approximate position when she sank. By measuring the time delay between acoustic signals received at different hydrophone arrays, they calculated that the submarine had gone down in a region approximately 1,700 miles northwest of Hawaii. But approximate meant an area of several hundred square miles, and the ocean floor in that region ranged from 15,000 to 17,000 feet deep, depths far beyond the reach of conventional salvage equipment. The Navy deployed the USNS Mizar, a research vessel equipped with a deep-towed sonar system, to conduct a detailed search of the calculated impact zone. For 3 months, the Mizar crisscrossed the search area, dragging sonar arrays behind her while analysts studied the returns, looking for anything anomalous on the seafloor. They found volcanic formations, sediment plains, and scattered debris from decades of maritime traffic. No submarine. In July 1968, after reviewing the acoustic data again, analysts refined their calculations and adjusted the search area slightly northwest. The Mizar repositioned and resumed scanning. On August 5th, the sonar detected a large metallic object resting on the seabed at a depth of 16,500 feet. The object was approximately 300 feet long, oriented at a 15-degree angle, and partially embedded in sediment. Its profile matched the dimensions of a Gulf II-class submarine. The CIA ordered the Mizar to remain on station and conduct multiple sonar passes to confirm the identification. The returns were consistent. This was K-129. She lay intact in 3 primary sections: the forward hull containing crew quarters and torpedo tubes, the central section with the conning tower and missile compartment, and the aft section housing the engines. The submarine had imploded during the descent, but major structural elements had survived the impact with the seafloor. Most critically, the missile compartment appeared structurally intact. Now the question became, could they reach it? And if so, what could they bring back? Recovering an object from 3 miles beneath the ocean surface was considered impossible in 1968. K-129 rested at 16,500 feet, where water pressure exceeded 7,000 pounds per square inch. No crane could reach that deep. No salvage ship possessed the lifting capacity. But the CIA had Howard Hughes. Hughes was America's most eccentric billionaire, reclusive, paranoid, but still controlling Hughes Tool Company and Hughes Aircraft. His public persona made him perfect cover for a classified operation. In August 1968, CIA officers presented Hughes executives with a proposal: design a ship capable of retrieving a large object from the deep ocean floor. The cover story: Hughes was funding deep-sea mining for manganese nodules. The ship would be publicly presented as a mining vessel. The executives understood the magnitude. They would need to design a ship capable of lowering a massive mechanical claw 3 miles down, grasping a 2,000-ton submarine, and lifting it back without Soviet detection. Construction began in 1970. The Hughes Glomar Explorer would be 619 feet long with a massive moon pool in her hull. Through it would descend a capture vehicle, a giant mechanical claw suspended on steel pipe segments forming a continuous column to the seafloor. The engineering required innovations in metallurgy, hydraulics, and control systems. The pipe had to support the submarine's weight without breaking under its own mass. The claw had to grasp a fragile, corroded hull without causing structural failure. All in secret. The CIA arranged extensive media coverage of Hughes's supposed mining venture. Press releases described revolutionary deep-sea mining technology. The story was plausible enough to satisfy curiosity. Soviet intelligence monitored construction with suspicion, but couldn't prove anything. The Glomar Explorer was launched in 1973 and began her maiden voyage. Her true destination: K-129's coordinates. The Glomar Explorer departed Long Beach on June 20th, 1974. Aboard were 300 crew members. Only 40 knew the true mission. The transit took 12 days, tracked by Soviet satellites the entire way. On July 4th, the ship arrived and established dynamic positioning. Lowering the pipe string to 16,000 feet took 6 days. On July 10th, the capture vehicle reached the seafloor. Cameras transmitted grainy images, sediment, debris, then K-129's unmistakable outline. The submarine rested at an angle, corroded and encrusted. The conning tower was collapsed, but the missile compartment remained intact. The capture vehicle maneuvered into position. Hydraulic arms extended, gripping the hull at structural points. The operation required extraordinary precision. After 14 hours, the claw was secured. On July 11th, the lift began. The submarine ascended at 3 feet per minute. Inside the command center, engineers monitored stress levels and pipe integrity. A single failure would send K-129 back to the abyss. For 8 hours, the lift proceeded flawlessly. Outside, Soviet vessels continued their patrols, unaware of what was happening beneath them. Then, at 8,000 feet, disaster struck. A pipe segment fractured from metal fatigue. The failure cascaded. Additional segments snapped in rapid succession. Alarms sounded. The capture vehicle began to fall. K-129's hull disintegrated. The forward section tore away, tumbling into the abyss. The aft section followed. Only the central section housing the missile compartment and conning tower remained partially secured. The winching system strained to halt the descent, motors screaming. Slowly, the fall stopped. The capture vehicle hung suspended, holding 1/3 of K-129. The rest was gone. The mission commander made his decision: continue with what remained. For 5 more days, engineers worked around the clock, redistributing stress loads, preventing further failures. The crew existed in exhausted tension. On July 16th, the capture vehicle breached the surface. Floodlights illuminated mangled steel, barely recognizable. The missile compartment was visible, hatches sealed. Debris hung from the structure. and somewhere inside were the bodies of Soviet sailors who had died 6 years earlier. The moon pool was sealed. Salvage teams extracted K-129's remains from the claw over 3 days. Piece by piece, the wreckage was dismantled, cataloged, and secured. What they found would change the intelligence landscape of the Cold War. The recovered section was 70 feet long, missile compartment, conning tower, and crew spaces. 6 bodies were found, preserved by cold water and darkness. The CIA had anticipated this. A quiet ceremony was held aboard the Glomar Explorer. A chaplain read prayers. The bodies were sewn into weighted shrouds and committed to the sea with full military honors. The ceremony was filmed, the footage classified for decades. But the intelligence value lay in the wreckage itself. Salvage teams extracted cryptographic machines, sonar equipment, torpedo guidance systems, and nuclear warhead fragments. They documented construction techniques, metallurgy, and welding standards. Every detail was photographed and cataloged. Among the most significant discoveries, remnants of 1 R-21 ballistic missile. Key components like the guidance system, re-entry vehicle, and warhead fragments survived. These provided unprecedented insight into Soviet missile technology. The cryptographic machines were even more valuable. Within months, NSA engineers had reconstructed their operating principles and begun exploiting Soviet encrypted communications. But the greatest coup was operational knowledge. By studying K-129's layout and equipment, American intelligence could infer Soviet submarine doctrine, training methods, patrol procedures, maintenance protocols, and crisis responses. This knowledge informed U.S. tactics and strategic planning at the highest levels. While salvage teams worked inside, Soviet surveillance continued outside. Satellites photographed the ship. Trawlers shadowed her movements. KGB analysts noted suspicious activity, such as the ship remaining stationary for weeks and conducting no visible mining. But the Soviets didn't act. They suspected something but couldn't prove it. Confronting the United States would require admitting they'd lost a submarine, a humiliating revelation. So they watched, waited, and filed reports. On August 9th, the salvage operation was completed. The Glomar Explorer departed August 10th, maintaining her cover story. Throughout the 14-day transit, the crew maintained absolute silence. The 40 who knew the truth understood. Silence was survival. The ship arrived at Long Beach on August 24th. The wreckage was offloaded under darkness, transported to a classified facility. The crew was debriefed and dispersed. Most would never speak of it again. For 18 months, Project Azorian remained secret. Fewer than 50 people knew the full details. Despite recovering only 1/3 of the submarine, the operation was considered successful. The intelligence justified the $800 million cost. But in February 1975, the secret unraveled. Journalist Jack Anderson received a tip and began investigating. CIA Director William Colby personally asked him to kill the story, but only Anderson agreed to delay, not suppress. On March 18, 1975, he published a column confirming the CIA had attempted to recover a Soviet submarine. The story went worldwide. Diplomatic fallout was immediate. Soviet Ambassador Dobrynin lodged formal protests. Soviet media condemned American piracy. The U.S. government issued carefully worded denials, refusing to confirm or deny specifics. This is now commonly known as the Glomar response. Soviet intelligence launched investigations. They reviewed records and interrogated families, but found nothing conclusive. The Soviet Navy altered patrol routes, changed communication protocols, and upgraded cryptographic equipment. In Washington, the CIA concluded Project Azorian had achieved its objectives. The intelligence had already been exploited, but the human cost lingered. The 6 recovered sailors were identified through forensic analysis. Their families were eventually informed they'd died in the line of duty. In 1992, the CIA released the burial film to Russia as post-Cold War reconciliation. Russian officers expressed quiet gratitude that their comrades had been treated with dignity. The remaining 92 crew members remain entombed in K-129's forward and aft sections, 3 miles beneath the Pacific. Their names are inscribed on monuments in Russia. Their graves are unmarked, their final resting place known only to the ocean and those who possess the coordinates. Project Azorian ended with questions. What caused K-129 to sink? Why did 98 men die? Were the answers worth the cost? The CIA's analysis provided no definitive conclusions. The most likely scenario: a catastrophic internal explosion while at or near the surface, missile malfunction, battery fire, or torpedo accident. The blast would have ruptured the pressure hull, causing immediate flooding. An alternative theory suggested collision with an American surveillance submarine, but no evidence supported it. A third theory involved sabotage, quickly dismissed as unfounded and disrespectful. The truth will never be known. The forward section, where an explosion would have originated, was not recovered. The Soviet Navy's investigation reached no conclusions either. K-129's loss was attributed to unknown causes. Her crew was posthumously honored. The Pacific Fleet moved on. For the families, the ambiguity was torturous. Soviet authorities provided minimal information. Memorial services were held, pensions granted, monuments erected. But the absence of answers left wounds that never healed. Some family members learned about Project Azorian through declassified documents in the 1990s. 6 bodies had been recovered and buried at sea. The revelation provided closure but raised new questions. Why hadn't they been informed? Why the secrecy? The answer was simple: operational security. Intelligence was considered more valuable than the emotional needs of grieving families. Both superpowers made similar calculations routinely. The Glomar Explorer was placed in mothballs after the mission, then leased for actual deep-sea mining in 1980. The operations failed. She was converted to a drilling ship in 1997 and eventually scrapped in 2015, her extraordinary history known to only a handful. K-129's wreckage remains on the Pacific seafloor, scattered across a debris field half a mile wide. The coordinates remain classified. Oceanographic vessels occasionally pass overhead, their sonar detecting anomalies. They move on, unaware of the graveyard beneath. For the intelligence community, Project Azorian became legend and cautionary tale. It demonstrated what was possible when resources and will aligned. It also demonstrated the limits of secrecy. Secrets eventually surface. The question was when, and at what cost. Officers debated whether the mission should have been attempted at all. The debate continued for years, unresolved, reflecting fundamental tensions within intelligence work. For the Soviet Navy, K-129's loss remained painful. The American recovery operation had been humiliating proof that the ocean offered no sanctuary from espionage. Soviet submariners spoke quietly about the incident, speculating what had gone wrong. Officially, the topic was closed. Unofficially, it haunted the fleet. In 2007, a memorial was erected in Vylyachinsk, Russia, listing all 98 crew members. Families attended. Officers stood at attention. A chaplain offered prayers. For a moment, the Cold War's silence was broken by grief acknowledged. The burial film, released by the CIA in 1992, was shown to family members in Moscow. Many wept. Some expressed anger at the decades of secrecy. Others thanked the American sailors for conducting the ceremony with dignity. One widow said simply, "At least they did not leave him down there alone." The Cold War ended in 1991, but its mysteries remained. Those who served on the Glomar Explorer, who studied K-129's wreckage, who authorized the operation, they carried memories that documents could never capture. The weight of responsibility, the fear of discovery, the moral complexity of stealing the dead. Most carried those memories in silence, bound by oaths that outlasted the conflict itself. One question persists: was it worth it? Did the intelligence justify the cost, the diplomatic fallout, the prolonged grief of 98 families who deserved answers? The question assumes intelligence can be measured simply. But perhaps the information prevented a nuclear miscalculation. Perhaps it saved millions of lives. Or perhaps it was simply another marginal gain in an endless competition. The value remains unknowable, lost in shadow. The men who authorized Project Azorian believed it was necessary. They operated in a world where uncertainty was lethal, where even small advantages could determine survival. History judges them with the clarity of distance. But for the 98 crew members of K-129, there is no judgment, only absence. They vanished into the Pacific, their deaths unwitnessed, their sacrifice unacknowledged for decades. Their legacy is not glory but silence. 3 miles beneath the surface, K-129's wreckage endures. Light does not penetrate those depths. The submarine will rest there for centuries, gradually disintegrating, becoming indistinguishable from the seafloor. Future generations may reach it easily, but by then the Cold War will be ancient history, its urgency incomprehensible to those who never lived under the shadow of annihilation. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more forgotten moments from the Cold War. And tell me, do you think this encounter could have ended differently?